Yeah, and so I also, for the first 3 years, I lost weight, but then I was feeling more energetic. My energy levels were up, and then the more I felt better, the more I really believed that at my core, like, this is the answer. And so I truly believed that veganism was the answer. But little did I know that the identity of now being a vegan had crept in, and so I really became one of those irritating, preachy vegans who would carry on Instagram about, you're killing animals, and I didn't realize at the time, I didn't have enough awareness, but I was becoming very judgmental of other people, and I put myself on a moral high ground because I'm such a good person. And it's a trap that unfortunately in today's society a lot of us fall into. We attach ourselves to these identities, and then we become this I am a vegan, and then I am a good person, and then we virtue signal all over social media, and then we feel good about ourselves. Okay, finally.
It's been a long start to this podcast.
Jeepers, we had about an hour of technical issues trying to set this up. Finally figured it out, I think.
Nearly called it quits.
Yo, what a start to the day. It's been quite a good one, eh?
Yeah, I got in the ocean for the first time in a long time. Felt good.
Yeah, nice little ocean dip start the day.
Yeah, it's nice and warm today, which is nice.
It's a beautiful day outside. We actually want to get this episode
done and dusted so we can go enjoy it.
and go down to the beach. With that being said, we've actually been, I suppose, looking forward to this episode, but in the same time a little bit apprehensive about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic we've been avoiding. But a topic that's very much important in our lives, and cause for massive shifts in our lives as well. A lot of questions we get on the sidelines. So now we're just going to speak about it publicly.
Yeah, time to unpack it a little bit. And that's the topic we're going to speak about is our personal journey with diet. And more specifically, we were both vegan for a very long time. I think I was about 5 years or so. You were about 7 years.
Yeah.
So combined, we spent a lot of time in that I suppose, world, and we are no longer both vegans. And I think it would be disingenuous to not speak about that, and just, because we were quite strong advocates for the vegan lifestyle, and we're not anymore. And so, I think it's a tricky topic, because I know when I was a vegan, I was hardcore about my views, and I had an argument for everything. And so this episode, if there's any vegans listening to it who are ready to kind of fire, it's like, okay, I know I get it, because I was that vegan and I was always the one attacking and always had my arguments. And so we're not here to tell you what's best for you. At the end of the day, everybody needs to make their own decisions for themselves. But we're just going to chat about our lives and our path and where we're at now. And we don't have all the answers, but we're just going to talk about what works for us and why we started down that path and why we inevitably left that path, and all the things we kind of learned during the process. And it has been one kind of big journey of multiple levels of realization along it. And so, there's a lot to unpack. So we're going to try and chat about it all today. But I think we should start at the beginning. And Tara was vegan before I was vegan. She was vegan, I think, before the word vegan was even popular. Nobody even knew what a vegan was back then, eh?
No, I used to go to the restaurants and I would say, do you have anything that's vegan? And I would get so many strange looks from all the waiters, waitresses, owners of the restaurant, and I'd have to resort to ordering a bunch of sides, like rice and steamed vegetables, because that's what they had that was quote unquote vegan.
Yeah, so you were a proper OG back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, I started around 2014, my journey to veganism began, and it was actually, I was 6 months into my first year of varsity. I had spent a gap year in France, and I was at the phase of my life where I wasn't exactly healthy. I was drinking a lot, wasn't sure which diet to follow, and I was struggling quite a bit with my health. I was suffering with a heart condition, inflammation of the heart, which now in retrospect, looking back, was actually caused because of the HPV vaccine, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But back then I was I was suffering immensely. A cardiologist told me that I need to stop exercising. I need to increase my protein to help heal my heart, which, you can't tell me to stop exercising. That's not going to work. So I looked for something else, and I came across Freely the Banana Girl. For those who have been vegan long enough, I know a few friends who have also fallen into the Freely trap. But I found a few of her videos, and she convinced me to go cold turkey overnight vegan. I remember going down the stairs to my family and telling them, listen, I'm no longer going to eat butter, cheese, eggs, meat. I am now a vegan. And my dad looked at me with a massive concern. You're going to die, Tara, were his exact words. And so, yeah, that started my path. I went cold turkey, and I must say, initially I felt great, but after a while I didn't. And so that's why we're going to talk about that.
So the start of it, and I find that's quite interesting. You mentioned the suffering, and I think it's in so many ways when we are suffering in whatever way that is, we look for things to help us, and then we can find things like this, ideologies like veganism, and it really does, help in the beginning.
Yeah, I did. I felt great initially. I think for the first 2 years, I felt on top of the world. I mean, I was glowing, essentially. I was fully detoxed. I mean, I was eating raw till 4 and all those funny different categories of vegan, mostly raw at some points. And it really allowed my body to have some sort of a cleanse. And that's essentially termed the vegan glow. And that vegan glow trapped me into thinking that veganism was the answer to all of my problems. Despite, after 3 years, my health drastically deteriorating. And then, suffering gut issues, skin issues, hormonal issues, seeing the best gastroenterologists in Cape Town, and all of them telling me to check my diet. And my diet was a mess, and I refused to believe them because it became my identity, and I was no longer going to shift my perspective because, I learned so much about veganism. And when you learn about a topic that you're so passionate about, you kind of put blinders onto everything else around you, and it becomes everything else that gets thrown your way that's against your views, you kind of dismiss. And I became very close-minded.
So there's so much to unpack on this topic, and it's so difficult because it's like I want to go in every single direction with it. But yeah, I think just taking it back to, I suppose, my start with it, I actually saw a video that you had posted, and you know this, but Tara had actually shared a video back in the day on Facebook, and it was, I'll never forget, it was a speech by Gary Yourofsky, and he's one of the big vegan, I suppose, leaders out there, and the speech was titled The Greatest Speech You'll Ever Hear. And it was an hour long, and I think I was hungover that day. I think I was probably like 22 years old or 21, and I lay at my dad's house, and I was like, okay, let me watch this video. And so I watched the video, and it was an hour long, and it was really wild because once you see certain things, you can't unsee it. And I didn't go vegan overnight, but all these seeds had been planted in my head of like, oh, hectic. Like, I didn't know all these things about the animal agriculture industry, and all the claims that they made about the environmental impacts, and all these things that were my eyes had been open to, I couldn't unsee. And so I didn't go vegan overnight. It took me about a year before I really slowly tapered my way off of animal products for about a year, and I felt incredible during that process of cutting out animal products. But then again, I mean, we can get to this just now, but there's so many nuances to even what is the good animal products and the quote-unquote not good animal products. But I felt better when I went on the, like you said, the vegan glow.
Yeah, and I think that's what you were chatting about before we hopped onto the podcast, and we were speaking about the healthy user bias. Once you go vegan, it's not just, oh, the veganism made me healthy. When you go vegan, you become a lot more aware of everything. You start reading labels. You start being aware of, processed foods and all the additives, and it's an all-round healthier lifestyle. Drink more water, you become aware of the water you're drinking, you exercise a bit better. It's an overall arching healthy user bias, which gives you that vegan glow. Yes,
and so I want to get to the identity thing, but you touched on a good point, and it is the vegan journey, I'm so grateful for it. As much as I look back and I cringe at the way I used to behave, and how lost I got down that identity of it all. But it really does it started me off on the process of questioning things. And we've grown up, our whole lives, we just get fed whatever we've been fed. We don't really question things. We consume all these different things. And I think the veganism argument kind of opened your eyes to like, oh, hang on, this is actually not healthy, or this is not the way it should be done, or these animals are really, we don't actually know what's happening behind the scenes. So you start to question things, and I think that questioning is a fantastic start to the awakening process, which is multiple levels of it, and I think it's a never-ending journey. But once you start to question things and really dissect these things that we just accept as gospel truth, a lot of things kind of unravel. And that heightened awareness throughout the journey was definitely integral to where we're at today.
It's completely necessary.
It
opened my eyes to the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry, and just how the world, doesn't necessarily, not everyone's trying to make you sick, but it's definitely not a health system. And so the search for health and through suffering definitely was one step in the awakening process. And essentially we woke up to the pharmaceutical and food industry, but now we've woken up from the vegan industry, from veganism itself. And so we've leveled up, but we first had to get through the identity portion of veganism and how that consumed us. Because like I said, I was vegan for 7 years, and after 3 years my health drastically got bad, like really bad. I didn't even want to go out anymore. I used to decline social events because my gut was so messed up that I was worried I was essentially going to shit myself when I would go out. And that's the honest truth. I'd have like...
You've had gut issues for years.
Yeah, I had really, really but worse than it is, it's tenfold now. It's so much better now compared to the way it was. But after 3 years of being vegan, essentially the glow had faded. And I was now so consumed in the identity of being a vegan. It was in my Instagram bio. I was known as the vegan. I would walk into a social setting and be like, oh, this is Tara, the vegan, because I was vegan for so long, as we mentioned in the beginning. But when I first went vegan, I knew no one in Cape Town, in South Africa, actually, that was vegan. I used to go online and make friends with people in Australia that were vegan, because there's some there, but no one was vegan here. But after 3 years, I started getting so ill and my health started getting so bad, but I refused to believe it was my diet, even though many experts were telling me it was, my family was telling me it was, but I just refused. And that was just all coming down to being so identified with the term vegan that I put my blinkers on to any other information that presented itself to me, and that was really dangerous.
Definitely. So I got quite a bit of thoughts on this, and something I've thought a lot about over the years, and that is the identity. And it's funny how, people who go vegan have the best of intentions, because when you see all the things that you see and you watch all these documentaries like What the Health and Forks Over Knives and all these things, and then you really go into that world. I think there's 3 main reasons that people go vegan. I think we can touch on them just now and dissect how it's changed for us. But it's first of all health, then it's environment, and then ethics, or animal cruelty. So those are the 3. People either go vegan for one of those 3 or all 3. And so your intentions are good, because you genuinely want to do good, and make a difference.
Yeah, it started for health for me as it did for you, as you can touch on that. But eventually I stuck with veganism despite my health deteriorating, because I was so convinced that it was the right thing to do for the environment.
Yeah, and so I also, for the first 3 years, I lost weight, but then I was feeling more energetic. My energy levels were up, and then the more I felt better, the more I really believed that at my core, like, this is the answer. And so I truly believed that veganism was the answer. But little did I know that the identity of now being a vegan had crept in, and so I really became one of those irritating, preachy vegans who would carry on Instagram about, you're killing animals, and I didn't realize at the time, I didn't have enough awareness, but I was becoming very judgmental of other people. And I put myself on a moral high ground because I'm such a good person. And it's a trap that unfortunately in today's society, a lot of us fall into. we attach ourselves to these identities, and then we become this I am a vegan, and then I am a good person, and then we virtue signal all over social media, and then we feel good about ourselves. And I can say this because it was my life. My life was pretty much a mess in terms of my personal life, but it was easy to go to bed at night being like, well, I told everybody how much of a good person I am, and everybody else is shit. And it's easy to get for the ego to take over and not actually look at yourself and look at your own life, but go out there and preach to other people that this is how you must be living, this is how you must be eating, when we are still trying to figure out the answers. And so for anybody to be able to stand on that podium and preach to other people, I think it's so disingenuous and self-righteous. And that was me. I was that person who got so caught up in being a vegan that I would argue constantly with people. And I just, no matter what, and that's why I started this podcast off by saying that I know the arguments. I know there's going to be somebody coming at us, arguing with us, and I know what's going to come. It's going to be like, well, you were never vegan, you were plant-based, and all these scripts that we learn from listening.
Titles and labels.
And we know the arguments because we've all listened to them, and we all go out there and we recite them and we sound clever, but unpacking the topic more for us, and we'll get to that just now, but just ending off the identity thing, I think humans have a tendency to fall into ideologies that become like parasites of the mind, and I think we need to be careful of that. And I got so blinded by it. After 5 years of being vegan, my health was deteriorating. I was so thin, my teeth were chipping, I had like rings under my eyes, and I was healthy. I was eating all the things, taking all the B12 supplements and these supplements and supplements all day long, and I had to start to question my own beliefs around it, because I realized that I never ever wanted to listen to anybody else's argument. In my mind, I knew I was right. So, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I think as I matured and developed and started listening to the other side of the argument and realizing like, okay, cool, I have to keep, if I'm going to preach about being open-minded to new things, I have to be open-minded to my own things.
And that was definitely the next segment, because as everyone can probably hear, we were very hardcore vegan. I mean, I used to get a kick out of watching other people bash strangers on YouTube about what they eat in a day. Freddie the Banana Girl used to make these horrible videos and dissect what other people put out onto the internet about their diets, and I would watch this and get a kick about her just completely destroying them with absolutely no compassion, no love. And I think that was one of the negative effects of the identity of veganism, is you start to lose compassion for humans.
Yes, you almost you fall into that trap of humans are a virus and humans are the worst thing on the planet, and the animals are all that matter, and because I'm advocating for these animals and I have no idea about how all these systems affect other systems.
You stop coming from a place of love, and that's essentially what's going to fix this planet. And I think we were moving away from that alignment of love, and so that's where my question to you comes in, because you were the one who shifted our diet. Initially, I was very close-minded. Obviously, I was still very much in the paradigm of veganism is the way to go, and I was gonna be vegan for the rest of my life. But something shifted in you. You started becoming a lot more open-minded to the other side of the story, and you essentially brought into our life a bit of balance. And so, what was that trigger? What was that perspective shift? What caused you to start questioning veganism?
It's a good question. I don't know if there was one certain thing, but I think it was a lot of the time. Like I just used to listen to podcasts all the time, and I love listening to podcasts. And I think it was a couple of Joe Rogan's podcasts where he's obviously not a vegan, and he's quite, I would say, against the vegan narrative. And I used to get so irritated with him and be like, you it's so great to listen to you, but you're so wrong on this topic. And he had a couple of experts on from both sides, and then I started listening to both sides of the argument, and I slowly started to just consider the possibility that, you know, as much as my ego didn't want to hear it, maybe I was slightly wrong on certain things. And I started I remember listening to a podcast because my teeth were like chipping and like falling apart. And then I listened to a podcast where I think it was Paul Saladino, who's very much the carnivore guy. And I started listening to his podcast just to like take in like what is being said, because also the carnivore movement started happening. More people were going carnivore, and I was like, there must be an argument for this. And so I think it's a joke, but let me listen to it. And I listened to a podcast where they were actually talking about dental health and for your teeth. There was something in, I think it was liver or organ meats. And then the whole world of information about how beneficial organ meats are, specifically like the most nutrient dense, bioavailable forms of all kinds of things for the body. And listening to all this, and the arguments made a lot of sense to me. And so I was very confused for a long time, but I think my health really started to deteriorate, and I knew something wasn't right.
Yeah, your training was taking a knock as well. I think you were getting quite frustrated with the fact that you were training so hard, but you weren't really seeing results in muscle mass and stuff. So
yeah, all of that. And I used to eat so much, and I was just getting thinner and thinner and thinner.
I know, we used to plow through food, because as a vegan, you need to eat so much. And I think that's also another trigger. I mean, when I went to go see the gastroenterologist, he told me, he said, you are eating way too much fiber, when I explained my diet. And I remember looking at him thinking, you know nothing. You know, I can eat as much fiber as I want. I can eat as much vegan food as I want. And I mean, initially I can even go back and tell myself I was wrong. I mean, I know a few people who also got caught when you initially get when you get hooked by Freely the Banana Girl, for example. She was one of the very first out there voices of veganism. And her whole argument around veganism was so compelling, but then she would tell you how she eats, and that's the only vegan way to eat, and that was a diet of raw till 4, which is a very low fat, very high carb. So basically she would advocate for, if those who know Freely are going to laugh as well if they have now moved away from it, but 10 bananas in a smoothie would be breakfast. And then lunch would be a Datorade, which is basically 20 medjool dates blended in water. That's what I would have for lunch. And so initially you could argue that I was doing vegan wrong, and a lot of people could argue that it wasn't a well-balanced vegan diet. And I did realize that after a year and a half of doing raw to 4, I thought, shit, okay, maybe I'm actually doing the veganism wrong. That's why I'm not feeling as optimal as I should be on a vegan diet. And so I changed my vegan diet. I ate a lot more fats, although I was still quite fearful of the fats. But I ate a lot more vegan protein, like chickpeas and lentils and legumes and soy. But my gut was still a mess, an absolute mess. And I was so convinced that it wasn't my diet until you started changing your diet and starting to kind of put in these little nuggets of information that you were learning along the way about the organ meats and whatnot. And I had a friend in Varsity as well. He's the owner of Ancestral Nourishment as well, and I always think that he was a kind of little devil's advocate on my shoulder, because like you were mentioning, it went into the carnivore phase of the trendy way to eat, and he had been vegan for a while, and then he went into the carnivore, and he was kind of challenging my thoughts the whole time. And now going full circle, now that we eat liver and organ meats and we use his products, what he was saying back then was actually right. And help fix my gut.
Yeah, shout out to Ancestral Nourishment. Yeah. Rika is very, very clued up in the ancestral diet, and not that that's a whole different topic in terms of the extremes of that. But I remember getting liver capsules. I was like, okay, I got this liver thing. There's too much of an argument for how beneficial liver is, so I'm going to get some capsules just to reintroduce into my diet. And I'll never forget having those capsules, and I lay awake the whole night. It felt like every cell in my body was like waking up, and I was like, my body's been so deprived of certain nutrients for so long that after that I was like, I've been doing something wrong, and I had to then question everything. And you mentioned Freely the Banana Girl. I think she also eventually kind of lost the plot. If you remember, you watched her stuff. But also, it kind of speaks to the whole, when we are on this journey, inherently we look up to people, and we're like, oh, they sound like they know what they're talking about. Let me just copy them. Let me follow them. So we follow all these people, and the whole thing always comes back to like, okay, there's truth in all these different things. I mean, even the raw till full thing, or even eating raw sometimes if you're on a cleanse and doing certain things, there's a place for all of it. But we like to get hung up on this, I'm a vegan, or I'm a carnivore, or I'm keto, or I'm
paleo,
fucking this, or whatever. And then we do this so hardcore that it becomes so out of balance. And listening to other people, it's like if anybody tells you they have the answer for diet, they're full of shit, because everybody's different. Everybody's gut microbiome's different. I mean, you can't eat half the things I can eat all day long, and we've had to figure out what actually works for us. And also intuitive eating has become a big thing, and I think we'll touch on that just now. But another factor for the transition out of veganism for me, when I realized, like, hang on, there's a lot more questions than answers here, and I'm not so sure on my position anymore, because I was so hardcore that I had the answers, and it felt good for so many years. But once I started to unpack that, it was like an unraveling. And I think that's a big part of the self-developmental journey, is like actually being able to admit, like, I don't actually know.
And that's the thing with identities and attaching yourself to a certain form of eating or a lifestyle. You completely shut off to any other possibilities. And what's the saying? The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And as soon as you think you've got it figured all out, you're the most stupid person in the room. And that, I fell into that trap. I thought I had the answer, the key to all health issues, all environmental issues. Everything was going to be fixed with veganism. And slowly and surely I had to be humbled into, no, that's actually not the case.
Yeah, there's a great book, and I'd actually I'd recommend anybody that's vegan who still like can't figure out, because that I get it, you have all the arguments, like, what about environment, what about all these things, what about the animal cruelty, what about, all these different arguments,
chronic diseases, that was a big one,
all these things, because there's a great book, and there's many books out there, but the one big book that shifted my perspective a lot was called The Vegetarian Myth. By Lierre Keith. I think that's how you pronounce the author's name. It's quite a big book, and this person who wrote the book was a vegan for 20 years, and then obviously they're not a vegan anymore, but they break down all the arguments. And the thing is, the arguments, it's not black and white. It's not like meat is bad and dairy is bad. It's so nuanced, the whole field of this whole topic, that once you start to understand the complexities, you realize, there's so many layers to this. And we are as vegans thinking, we're not doing any harm to anybody. Meanwhile, you're supporting monocrop agriculture, which is completely destroying the topsoil and the environment and creating a lot more havoc in the ecosystems that they, so you're buying your veg and that at Pick and Pay, and you don't realize where it comes from and what ecosystem was destroyed and what animals died in that process. So there's all these arguments to all of it. And so, we can also get to this just now, but how we approach it now is, I feel like we're actually more conscious of how we consume food. But, maybe just to unpack some of those arguments, and again, I don't want to start to now give the facts, but as far as we've now learned and opened our minds to it all, like the environmental argument, there was a big thing about, all the vegans know the vegan argument for the environment, but like I just mentioned, if you're looking at monocrop agriculture, it's probably the worst thing for this planet, in terms of the ecosystem destruction, the soil damage, all these things, the amount of animals killed in that process, and the soil health is actually one of the biggest crises we have on this planet, is regenerating the soil so we can continue to produce food. And so then you look at things like regenerative agriculture, farms like Farmer Angus and Ryan, these good farms that, if you know how they operate, you understand that they are actually giving back to the planet. They're sequestering CO2 into the soil, creating more biodiverse systems, and the whole ecosystem is respected in a way that is kind of in harmony with nature.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. People are getting so caught up in a certain way of eating that they don't realize that by shopping for your produce at Woolworths is doing more damage to the planet than if you went to a local regenerative farm and got yourself some, beef patties and the local organic farmers market down the road and got some fresh fruits and vegetables. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's different layers. It's like Inception. We're waking up to all the different layers.
That's the thing. The waking up process has been it's just different levels. And we're not trying to say we're at another level that vegans are not at yet, but maybe you'll get to the point where you start to question even your strongly held beliefs, because, even just mentioning the animal, the meat thing, it's like, okay, of course, 90% of the vegans' argument is true, but factory farming for animals is one of the most horrific, practices, and the torment that those animals go through is horrific. And I still don't want to ever support that.
We still don't support that.
No,
we
don't
never
support that.
Yeah, we don't
We're very selective with the meat that we buy. And so it's nuanced. It's a very nuanced conversation. Meat that's been pumped with antibiotics and all these things that the cows have been fed soy and all this rubbish. So that has an impact on your health.
So that has truth. That has a lot of truth to it.
So the vegan argument is true in many respects, but not true when you unpack it a bit further and realize that it's not a black and white issue. And so the environmental thing, looking into those arguments, I'd invite you to go out there and go listen to the other side of the coin and realize that, cows farting methane that we've been told is going to cause us climate change and it's horrific for the environment. It's actually quite laughable. And then, every single thing that you're consuming, I'd invite you to think about it, whether you look at the ingredient list and you have... if there's palm oil in the processed food you buy, do you know that the ecological destruction that's causing? So if you're going to stand on this moral high ground and be like, I'm a virtuous person for what I'm doing, look at the other areas of your life, and every single thing that you buy has an impact somewhere down the line in the process. So the best thing you can do is actually become conscious of your choices, and that involves even fruit and veg and all these things that you are then buying. And so there's so many different arguments, and I know for everything that I say, somebody else is going to come back and say but this, but that, and it goes on forever. But
that's why this is, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, this is just our experience. We're not here to tell anyone how to eat. We're not trying to say what is the right diet, but we're just trying to share what shifted in our lives and what we learned, and how we moving forward have bettered our lives. And a big thing for me was, you were on this journey and you were opening your mind and you were learning all these new things, especially with the teeth, because I was also been having a lot of teeth issues and spending a small fortune at the dentist every other month. But I think the real trigger for me to switch my diet was my multiple miscarriages and my quest to having a child. And I was very reluctant and hesitant to follow you on your path to including more foods like organ meats and bone broths
and even
initially,
things like
and eggs.
Eggs, because I was literally just thinking about this now. It's so funny how we've been indoctrinated, like eating eggs is like smoking cigarettes and all these weird comparisons that the vegan, people made. And I believed all this, and I believed I was eating chicken periods and all this, way of framing it. But the reality is eggs are some of the best. It's got choline, it's a complete source of, amino acids. It's also a complete protein, so it's got everything you need in it. And it's fantastic it's one of the best things you can be consuming is eggs, from the other side of the argument, and then obviously reintegrating it back into our life with some good quality meat. You can feel the difference it makes, and it's not this poison that has been made out to be. But again, even the quality of your eggs is important, because what kind of eggs is it, you can see. And when you buy it, like we buy Farmer Angus eggs, and you can see it's bright yellow yolks. Chickens have been running around the fields. Everything's been natural process. Whereas if you're going to buy chicken eggs from a terrible farm, then again, it's very nuanced, and you have to know where you're sourcing your stuff.
Yeah.
But onto the fertility thing, that's super interesting.
But yeah, that I was very reluctant to eat any of that stuff. And actually, what was interesting when I shifted my diet was that it took me a long time to recognize animal products as food. And so I remember eating when we would have bone broth, or we would have eggs, or there would be some form of fish or poultry or whatever in front of me. I still wanted to have the same amount of vegetables and grains that I had been eating prior, and a small amount of meat on the side. I didn't classify that as food, and it actually took me a long time for my mind to register the animal product as food before it actually started making me full, which was quite an interesting thing after being 7 years vegan. I'm not sure if anyone else has experienced that.
You went into it very slowly.
I went into it very slowly, and I still, to be honest, I still eat majority plant-based, but it's more well-rounded, and I do incorporate a lot more eggs, and we do have a lot more protein in the night and whatnot, and that.
But also, quickly just interject, you suffer with low iron levels, and the reality is, if you want to get good amounts of iron, like liver, organ meat, and also red meat. I mean, it's the most bioavailable form of all these nutrients. Unfortunately, the reality is that it is in animal products. So if you can, it's just a fact.
Yeah, and that was the catalyst for me. Was, the multiple miscarriages kind of led me to start really having to look into what was the only thing I wasn't changing to give me the results I wanted, which was to have a child, and that was my diet. And you were already on this path of introducing things into your life, and so I had to look at what the universe was trying to show me. And so I started doing a lot more research. I started doing blood tests. I started working with a homeopath, and my results came out that I was severely mineral depleted, so my teeth were falling apart, anemic, so much so that my gynae said to me, "There's no way your body will hold a baby with that level of iron." I had to get an iron infusion, and I just, my hormones were not being nourished. And so I worked closely with a homeopath and gynaes and blood tests and doing my own research, listening to podcasts, listening to a lot of hormonal specialists, and that really shifted my perspective on, like, okay, if I really want a child, this may sound selfish to some vegans, or most vegans, but I'm going to have to change the way I eat, because for me it wasn't working. I tried it for 7 years. I tried every variation of veganism for 7 years. And the reality was my body was lacking so many things. No matter what I shifted, what I incorporated, I just wasn't absorbing the nutrients that I needed to, because my gut was such a mess. And so shifting my diet and incorporating the liver, I think, was one of the most fundamental things to improving my iron, my minerals, my iron recycling system, everything to do with actually what it takes to hold a child. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey, and I'm still on it. But I'm happy to say that, obviously there's a baby on the way now, and it's working for me. It's working for me. So I think the reasoning for this podcast is just, it could have done me really good a couple of years ago to listen to this, of someone sharing a story like this.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we're not trying to convince anybody that veganism's bad. I mean, it was integral to our health journey.
Yeah. I
mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, but we've continued to evolve, and I think that's a good thing, to be able to question your own beliefs and realize, actually, I could be wrong about this. It has allowed us to now thrive in different ways. Like, I feel better than ever. And I also intuitively eat. Like, if you know how to listen to your body tells you, like, I'm really needing some red meat today, or I'm just craving some fruit today, just some plants. I feel like a bit of a lighter, vibe, or whatever it is. If you listen to your body, like, you generally, for me, it works a lot better that way. And, just to kind of wrap up, I think, as I mentioned, there was 3 pillars as to why we wanted to be vegan. It was health, environment, and then the animal ethical issue. And so the health we've obviously discussed. We both went through our own unique challenges after a couple of years of being vegan. The environmental argument, in all honesty, if you can actually spend some time looking into it, you'll realize that it's very, very myopically focused and simple, the vegan argument, that if you actually just unpack the argument and look at all the variables, you realize that unless you really know how you're sourcing your food, you're not a better environmentalist for not eating meat. Unfortunately, that is the reality. And then the third one, which is a tricky one to talk about, because deep in the vegan cult, you become a advocate for animal, meat is murder, you're murdering animals and all this thing. And that has been a shift in how we view the world now, because we do consume. Obviously, we make every effort to consume animals that have gone through a process in which the environment's been respected and their environment's been respected. But yes, at the end of the day, we are then consuming them. And so, as harsh as it sounds, and I think for me specifically through the psychedelic journeys, and getting deeper realizations into the reality of this existence. It's like life eats life. Everything dies, everything lives, everything is in this continuous cycle. One day we're going to die and we're going to be eaten. And I think the problem with our society is we don't respect that. We just eat meat all day long, and it's shit quality meat and all these things. But now when we do have meat, it's actually, we always take, as for some people this might be a bit out there, but it's really become an integral part of our life to actually pray and to give thanks to that specific animal, and to respect the fact that we are now consuming it, and respect the actual cycle of life. And back in the day when, hunter gatherers and those societies used to exist, when they would go out and hunt a big animal, then it would be a big occasion, and they would have like a ceremony around it, and then they would eat the meat, and they wouldn't just eat meat all day long, but when they did eat meat, it was respected the process of life. And I think having that framework in mind when how we approach it, it's like, yes, this animal has died and we are now consuming it, and as long as we can make the best possible choices to be in alignment with nature and the environment, it doesn't negate the fact that an animal has died. But like I said, in nature, animals kill animals all the time, and it just is the way it works. So vegans might not like that, and I didn't like that. I wouldn't have liked hearing that. I would have still been like, yeah, well, you're still killing animals. Okay. But if I was living in the bush, I would be hunting animals to feed my family. And I know that argument also gets destroyed by the vegans, because they'll come at me for days on end for saying that. But just having a deeper, the way I view the world has changed, and I don't expect everybody else to understand that, but it's just it's a deeper respect for nature actually, and the way life works.
We're a lot more conscious.
A lot more conscious.
We're a lot more conscious of the way we eat, with what we choose to eat, how much of it we eat. Like you're saying, people eat meat for days on end. We eat meat maybe 2-3 times a week, once a day. That's it. Whereas, we definitely still don't agree with people going to a supermarket and buying meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Especially the shit quality meat.
Yes, exactly. It's all about source. It's all about source, and that's what we were kind of honing in on when we spoke about, waking up to multiple levels of this reality and respecting the cycle of life, as you mentioned.
And that whole process does make you, as you become more hyper aware, of how things affect you. And if you eat meat that the process hasn't been respected, and that animal has been through horrible conditions, treated inhumanely, you take on that energy, and you can
feel it.
You can feel it. And we spoke about this in the last podcast, I think, but it's a real thing. And so you know when you're respecting the process of nature by making conscious decisions, and when you're not, and you can feel it if you awaken to that level of I suppose living. So I think that's to wrap off the 3 main reasons, if we had to give some of the reasons behind the logical reasons. But it was more of a felt experience, and it was an evolution.
It was an evolution, and the way we eat now is basically just organic as much as possible. We don't really eat any vegetables that's not organic, and fruit. And then we support local as much as we can, and only source our meat from the best regenerative farms in the area.
Yeah, it's all about sourcing. If you can source locally and seasonally, and just trying to get in alignment with nature, I think is the best way to do it. But like we said, at the end of the day, we're not here to tell people how to eat. We still figuring out, okay, this works, this doesn't work, but
I get a lot of questions specifically on how my diet's changed. Personally, I get personal messages asking, what did I do that helped me to fall pregnant this time around compared to previous times? And the biggest thing was diet. The massive shift in my diet. Obviously, there were other things that went with it, and that will be a whole separate podcast on my fertility journey. But diet was one of the main factors, and so I think it's a good thing to just address that in our whole journey, so everyone gets an understanding of where we came from, why we went down that path, and why we chose to shift directions halfway through, and we're still learning. Yeah,
and that's the thing. That's why also we put out podcasts like this. Is we've walked that path for how many years. And by all means, go and walk it. But if what we're saying kind of lands with you, and you are in this identity of whatever the thing is, it doesn't even have to be veganism. It can be whatever it is. It's really good to question your own beliefs, because it's so easy to question everything out there, but you never really question what you believe. And I think that is if you do that in whatever way it is, you will, the more you admit that you don't know things, like you said, things that you make space for more things to be known, actually. It's like all paradoxical. So question your beliefs. Don't be hung up on an identity, because it always does lead to issues. And we've seen this in the world play out over history. Every time it becomes an identity, whether you're this or you're vaccinated or you're not vaccinated, all these groups that you form into, and then it becomes like a cult, and then you lose your mind in it. The group mentality takes over. And
causes conflict.
Yeah, it causes conflict. So
and
listen to
anger.
yourself.
Yeah, and what's the only thing we need to move away from is that.
Yeah, so make decisions for yourself and experiment for yourself. Don't take anybody's word for it. Figure it out, but try different things and keep
listen to
mind.
things that make you feel uncomfortable. I think that was something I didn't do for a long time, and that's why I stuck with the veganism for 4 years, more than my body wanted me to, because I was so against listening to the other side and things that made me angry or made me feel like I was being confronted with, I would listen to people probably like we speaking now, and I used to get so angry, my face would go red.
Like, people are idiots.
Yes. And I'm sitting here talking, so I can't imagine how some vegans must be feeling, and I must just also reiterate that I was there too, and I was feeling that too. But
I was that vegan who would argue with everybody, and I get it. If they're going to come at us, that's fine. But I mean, that's even why we argue sometimes, because it's like, how do you know that? Or
we do. We challenge each other quite a lot, actually.
Are
you really going to do that now?
Yeah, are you really sure about that? Like, how do you know that for sure? And
yes.
Sometimes that can be taken to the extreme, but I think we so easily assume we just have the answer to things, and
ultimately it's just it's experience, and it's what works for you. I mean, we want to do that genetic testing to actually see what codes for our DNA, and how.
But then also there's arguments against that.
Yes, I
it's
know.
All epigenetics, and your genes can express whatever depending on the environment. So there's all these different.
So many things to explore. So many things to explore.
So.
So that's our story, and that's one of the biggest parts of our life. I mean, you eat 3 times a day, so it's
and I mean, I think we covered all the main points of the.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing would be how we feel now, and I think we feel good.
I think that's the biggest testament to our own health journey. It's we over time. There's a progression. We feel better. If we look back at ourselves and how we used to live, so sure we knew everything, but now we're more unsure, but we definitely thriving. Our health is better. I feel a lot better in my training since I've been incorporating organ meats into my diet, eggs. I don't consume that much dairy, but if I do, it's proper milk, like from a good farm, and raw milk, raw cheese, like proper. I do feel stronger. I feel in the gym, I feel a more, strength training has gotten me better results. I feel stronger, and I feel like my body thrives more when I'm feeding it good, complete proteins like animal meats and stuff. And so I feel great. I feel fantastic, and
and I feel the same, but slightly different. I mean, I feel healthier, and I've noticed that my skin doesn't break out anymore. I used to have severe acne during my veganism. No more acne. What can be whatever time of the month, and my skin is fine. And I think that says a lot about my hormonal health at the moment, which is great, because I'm nourishing my hormones now with more fats and animal fats and animal proteins. And so I'm getting complete sources of most things, which I wasn't before. And I think the biggest thing as well is obviously your skin is a reflection of your gut health, and animal products have allowed my gut to take a bit of a breath from all the fiber I was loading it with, and that fiber was aggravating my gut so much that my gut was so inflamed I wasn't absorbing any nutrients, and so my nails were brittle, my hair was falling out, my skin was showing it, my gut was feeling it. And I just feel so much better now that I don't have only loose stools like I used to. I think for 5 years I only had loose stools.
I didn't have a solid shit in like 5 years. I just used to like
diarrhea every day.
And thinking back, I was like, how the fuck was that in any way healthy? And also, just to touch on, like, there's such a sinister agenda going on in the world, obviously with the COVID thing and all of that. But then looking into now, the vegan thing and the plant-based movement, everything's plant-based, but half of those plant-based foods are so full of shit.
GMO
the processed
stuff.
cuck that you're eating because it's a plant-based fucking chicken burger or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
you're causing yourself more problems with all those processed foods than anything else, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But
I would definitely recommend to anyone who's going to decide to stay vegan or don't label yourself as vegan.
Yeah.
Just try and eat as whole foods, plant-based as possible.
like
Then
real food.
real food. That's what we're trying to do. I think that basically summarizes how we eat now. Is we eat real food. We don't eat when I look at a label and it's got more than 5-6 ingredients, and it ends with artificial additives and sweeteners and this colorant and that flavorant, it's no longer food. Your body doesn't recognize that as food anymore, and that is actually one of the main irritants to gut health. And so there's so many quote unquote vegan plant-based products out there that are so unhealthy for you. So I just urge people to read the label and eat whole foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes that your body can tolerate. Also notice what your body's telling you. I didn't do that for so long, and I want to kick myself. My body told me if I could tolerate it or not, by the way that my gut responded, by the way that my skin responded, by the way my mood showed up. How is this food affecting me? Does it gel with me, yes or no? And you can do that with a process of elimination diet, which a lot of people do, which is called the FODMAPs diet, but I'm not a fan.
Any diet, be careful of.
Yes,
because
yeah.
There's truth in all of it. Like sometimes I love going into ketosis. Sometimes I love more carbs. Sometimes I like to just do all these different things, and they all have their merits. But as soon as you're like, this is the diet I follow, and I think I've said this earlier, so be careful of that, because you get caught up in that movement.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, also just want to add in everything we're told about health, question it, because the more you go down this path, you realize it's all inverted. All the things we are told is unhealthy is healthy, and all the things that we're told is healthy is actually questionable, especially if it's GMO foods and all these different things. So
that's what I love about Paul Saladino's Instagram. If those of you who don't know him, please follow him. He's so great. He actually goes into supermarkets and he calls out the bullshit. He literally goes, this almond milk, this health bar, this health powder. If you actually look at it, what's inside, it's fucking bullshit. It's not healthy. It's actually causing you more harm than if you went and you ate a piece of steak or ate an egg.
Exactly.
So I think that's the drive home, is just read the labels, eat real food, and listen to what your body's telling you. Your body will tell you if it's tolerating it or not, or if you're healthy or not. Look for the signs.
100%. And if you are vegan, don't come at us and don't be a preachy, angry vegan, because life's not meant to be spent that way. And just be happy. And
use your energy for something more constructive, because you're not going to convince us. Don't be like how we were. But I think that's the journey of life, is learning from each other's experiences. So some need to walk that path, and others will listen to this and potentially, hopefully, take something away that resonates, or just listen to a different view, different side of the story. So
I think that's a wrap, eh?
Yeah, that is a wrap, I think. Hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, we were actually debating this morning. We were like, I don't think we should do this episode.
Yeah. I think it's because I really don't like confrontation, and I would say this is the only area that I'm a quote unquote people pleaser, and I really don't like negative thoughts towards me. I feel that energy quite deeply, and so
because when you mentioned that you're not a vegan anymore, you lost so many followers.
I lost so
on
many
Instagram
followers, which is not important. But I think it's mostly I don't like it when people have negative thoughts about me, and I never have. It deeply affects me, and so this whole veganism thing is, I've definitely been very quiet about it, but every now and again I'll kind of mention what I am and I'm not eating, and it's quite hesitant, but just because the hate. I know the hate, because I was once there, and so I want the world to be filled with as much love as possible.
We made a post once on our Instagram, on our LifeXpanded page, about something to do with health, and one of the things was if you are going to eat meat, eat good quality meat. And oh my god, the vegans that came at us because we had this post, how can you say that meat is this and this and this? And I was like, I can't even argue with you guys, because I used to be one of you, so I know it's futile to argue with a vegan because they have all the scripts in their head that they just shout out at you, and they're so they're so sure of their position that you can't change their mind, and that's fine. It's for them to go down the path.
Yeah,
I think for those of you who are kind of also on the fence and don't really know, like there's so much information out there. Everybody has the answer, so it's an overload of information.
And I think what we're trying to do is we're just trying to strip the layers of titles and identities. Like at the core of all of us, we are all just souls experiencing life. So just strip away all these layers we keep popping on ourselves to try and be better or be right or be above that person and just strip it all away. We're all just doing our best. We're all just learning from each other, and I think
and none of us are perfect. We're all learning along the way.
So
all right, on that note, I think we should call it a day
and go enjoy the
These
sun.
dogs are on my lap with the ball. They've been begging me the whole episode
They've been very naughty
to go to the beach.
and
I think we should take them.
Yeah.
Let's go, boys. Okay.
All right, guys.
Cheers,
Thanks
guys.
so much.
Thanks for listening. Bye.